Freaks everywhere unite. My name is Justin Fensterman, and welcome to another episode of Hoops Freak Fensty, right here on YouTube, talking about the stories of the 1990s when it comes to the NBA. And make sure you catch all previous episodes of Hoops Freak Fensty too, because we have a lot of great content. We have a lot of great teams, a lot of great players that maybe we forgot about that we have been talking about. And I am so excited, as you can tell, I'm felling right now, because I'm talking about the topic that got me into basketball. The NBA, one of my favorite things. You know, Fensty Sports on X and also Instagram. Every Saturday, a new Hoops Freak Fensty comes out. And today, we're talking about the Dynasty, Part 1, the Chicago Bulls. Alan Parsons Project, Serious Q, You think about that, you think about greatness. You think about the Chicago Bulls, you think about the greatest player to ever play in the NBA, Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Michael Jordan in 1990 was getting ready to fly. A ton of documentaries that have been out regarding Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, Come Fly With Me, His Airness, a bunch of old VHSs, and for those that are young, videotapes before DVDs, before streaming. We actually had these rectangular videos that we had to put in these things called VCRs, and I was in it for all of it because I loved Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, the personality that he has, a serious and contender personality that he was not going to lose no matter what. And throughout Hoops Freak Fensty, Michael Jordan's come up from time to time. But this time, this is about the Chicago Bulls and the beginning of what was a takeover of most of the 1990s. And that is where we start, because in 1990, the Bulls not making too many roster moves. Let's talk about what they were before the 1990-1991 season. They were a team with a lot of skill. They had guys like Scottie Pippen. They had Stacey King. They also had John Paxson. They were ready to go. They were very mature. And also, before the 1990-1991 season, they began running what was called the triangle offense. Phil Jackson, Tex Winter, implementing it. Doug Collins, who coached the Bulls before Phil Jackson, didn't want any part of it, but Phil Jackson was all about it. Why? Why create the triangle offense? Why create another offense and switch around the whole game plan when you have someone like Michael Jordan? Well, let me tell you about the basis of the triangle offense. Now, you're probably wondering, the triangle offense, does it in fact involve a triangle? Yes, it does. What it is, basically, it creates space for all the players on the court on offense. The problem with the Bulls in the late 80s, Michael Jordan was just a one-man show. He took too much on himself. He took 24 field goals per game, led the league in that. But the problem was you had teams like the Detroit Pistons that saw him for the scorer that he was, and they said they were going to stop him. The Jordan rules. Check out the Bad Boys episode from Hoops Freak Fensty, along with other previous episodes too, right here on YouTube. But that is why the Bulls couldn't get to that next step. Michael Jordan was doing it all by himself. But what happened when the triangle offense was implemented, it started to give Jordan options to pass off to, or maybe fake the pass off and then take it himself to the hole. It gave him options. It wasn't isolation totally anymore, where Jordan got the ball and everybody was to get out of the way. No. This was getting the teammates involved, showing that the Bulls had more to offer, a true championship mindset involving everybody and all working together. And in the triangle offense, what it basically was, you had the center in the low block and the low post lined up. You had another player that was on the wing right at the arc. So that's one side of the triangle. And then you had somebody else in the corner. So that created a triangle right there on the side. And the side triangle, the side of the basket triangle, was the most popular. There are other ways to implement it, but that was the most popular. Why? Because the two other players in your starting lineup who are on the other side of the half court, they could go, and normally it's someone with the ball at the top of the key. They can choose to either go and get screened from any of the guys in the triangle, or they can take it themselves and go one-on-one. That was the decision. But the problem was the defense had to watch for cutting. Cutting was huge when it came to the triangle offense, but it was made to create space. It was so that Michael Jordan, when he saw that big defender come right there to stop his drive, he can pass off. He can throw out right to the arc, to the corner, to a wide open Scottie Pippen, a wide open John Paxson. That was what the method was to the madness. And once the Bulls implemented this, you saw just how dangerous they became. Hey, in 1990, Michael Jordan himself building his body to become stronger, to withstand that pain from teams like the Detroit Pistons, teams like the New York Knicks that just wanted to hammer the hell out of him. But you also got to see other Bulls blossom because of the triangle offense. Especially offensively, you saw Scottie Pippen become more of a presence. Horace Grant also on both sides of the ball. He was very key to the Bulls' run, Horace Grant, early on. And that was what he brought offensively. He matched that defensively because in 1990-91, the Bulls ranked number 1 in offense and number 7 in defense, which was absolutely great. Finished as the top overall seed for the Eastern Conference. And you got to see what greatness Michael Jordan, who won the MVP that year, brought to this team. And you got to see him further develop too as a passer. He wasn't only putting his head down anymore and trying to drive. He was now looking, turning his head more, making excellent passes. His assist numbers were up, but at the same time, you wouldn't think from the stat sheets, if you just looked at the stats, that you would have seen growth from Michael Jordan. But if you watched him on the court and the difference from 1990 to 1991, you saw maturity. They had guys like Stacey King, Bill Cartwright, who would sacrifice to protect Michael Jordan. And that's what it was all about. Hell, he averaged over 31 points per game, won a scoring title out of it. All-Star MVP, the whole package. Scottie Pippen right there at 18 points per game, being his second in command and showing that he also has some driving room too. And when you think of this Chicago Bulls team, this particular one of the greatest Bulls teams of all time, by the time they got to the playoffs, the Chicago Bulls were feared. They were absolutely feared, even by their arch rival, the Detroit Pistons. What added footnote, though, to the 1990-1991 season? Their draft pick, late in the second round, a guy by the name of Tony Kukoc out of Yugoslavia, but he did not play for the Chicago Bulls in 1990-1991. So the Bulls were without Tony Kukoc at this point. They were right there. They were that good. They were that efficient on both sides of the ball, and they had great coaching between Jackson and Winter. They enter the playoffs. They sweep the Knicks. They beat Charles Barkley, who was voted 4th in MVP. Michael Jordan won the MVP. He was number 4, Barkley, at the time on the Sixers. Conference finals. Here we go. The Chicago Bulls taking on the Detroit Pistons once again for the 4th straight year. Only this time, while the Detroit Pistons tried to get their patented Jordan rules in effect once again, the Pistons were a little bit older, they were a little bit slower, and the Bulls have just gotten that much better that the Pistons couldn't hang with Chicago. They couldn't handle the movement. They couldn't handle the agility. They could handle Michael Jordan a little bit, but they were getting frustrated. Throughout the series, you could see they had no business even competing with the Chicago Bulls then, because the Bulls knew how to get John Paxson involved. B.J. Armstrong came off the bench, and he turned up that pace a little bit more. And so now the Pistons' second unit has to get back, because when you take a guy like Michael Jordan out, for instance, even for a brief time, you put B.J. Armstrong in there, all of a sudden you're going to be off to the races on transition offense every single time. And that's why B.J. Armstrong was another important piece to the Chicago Bulls puzzle. In the conference finals, the Bulls sweep the Detroit Pistons. About 8-9 seconds to go, most of the Pistons start walking off the floor out of disrespect. Pistons claim that it was done to them by the Boston Celtics a few years prior, but they did that to the Chicago Bulls. Isaiah Thomas hiding behind his teammates while ducking Michael Jordan walking by the Bulls bench. But that was it for the two-time reigning champion Detroit Pistons, ousted in 4 games by the Chicago Bulls. And I'll just say this, Bill Laimbeer would say, well, they had home court. Hell no, it's not just that they had home court. They were that good. As someone who was a 4-year-old watching this team blossom, watching that series, it was more than just they had a home court advantage. You saw the Bulls take advantage of everything the Pistons were throwing at them. Pistons wanted to slow them down. They upped the speed. They were in much better conditioning than they were a couple of years prior. The wear and tear didn't really have as big of an impact as it did years prior. Why? The weight training Michael Jordan did the summer before the 1990-1991 season. And then when the Bulls got to the finals, we were finally going to see it. Michael Jordan, the new guy, taking over, the guy who's going to be on that mountaintop, ousting a guy who was on that mountaintop for the entire decade before, Magic Johnson. Still in 1991, over 30 at this point, second in MVP voting. He can still play. After this series, though, things would change for Magic Johnson. But focusing on this particular NBA Finals, Michael Jordan versus Magic Johnson. I can imagine for anyone that watched the NBA from the mid-'80s to that point, this was a dream matchup. The battle of two very talented, in my opinion, top 2 players of all time facing off. Michael Jordan, number 1, Magic Johnson, number 2. Both can play multiple positions. Both are good defenders. Both solid passers. Both solid scorers. Both are champions, multi-time champions. On the mountaintop prior to Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and then Isaiah Thomas snuck in there. But now this was Michael Jordan's time. 1991 was the changing of that guard. Now, the 1991 finals, how did it start out? Well, it started out with the Lakers win because Sam Perkins hits a clutch 3 with time winding down to put the Lakers up, and they stayed up and they win game 1 of the series. The Lakers back then, let's not forget, they had guys beyond Magic Johnson, James Worthy, another top talent, Byron Scott, Sam Perkins, Eldon Campbell, Vlade Divac, who was getting trained by the retired Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They had all of these guys, and they had a little bit more size and skill with that size than Chicago. But Chicago, from the triangle offense, was able to use that spacing, speed, and agility to be able to turn back the Lakers. The Lakers defeated the Rockets, defeated the Run TMC Golden State Warriors, and then the defending Western Conference champion Portland Trailblazers, another team with immense size. The Lakers were able to beat them and go to the NBA Finals and take a 1-0 series lead. Game 2 of the series had an iconic play that for those NBA fans and those Michael Jordan fanatics like myself that were watching all those documentaries on Jordan, the play that happened in Game 2 of the 1991 Finals transcended Michael Jordan. It showed just how much he can do mid-air. That's why he became his airness, Michael Air Jordan. From this particular play, Michael Jordan gets the ball, goes up on one side, and then sees the Lakers defenders coming in, switches hands, and flips it up with his left hand for a layup, midair, changing direction. And the call was so iconic by Marv Albert. Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan. It was incredible. I have chills thinking about that right now. That's how great that play was. And the Bulls ended up evening the series at 1 game apiece. Michael Jordan then in game 3 hits a clutch shot. You had Vlade Divac hitting clutch shots in game 3. Michael Jordan hit one over Divac to send the game to overtime, and then dominated overtime to give the Bulls a 2-1 lead. And then disaster struck for the Los Angeles Lakers. As we've seen a few times with the Lakers leading up to this series in previous years, game 4, they lose both James Worthy to an ankle injury and Byron Scott to a shoulder injury, both done for the series. And the Lakers tried to hang in there, but the Bulls shooting at the end of these games was just too hot, and the Lakers couldn't stand it. And they needed Byron Scott's range. They needed James Worthy's aggressiveness. They didn't have that anymore. So the Bulls were able to win that game, game number 4, by double figures, which leads us to game 5. The Bulls on the precipice, so close. Magic Johnson was throwing all the magic, 20 assists, boom, Vedi Vidi Vici, right there to Chicago. But it was not enough because you had Michael Jordan scoring 30 points, but also dishing double-digit assists. You had Scottie Pippen at 32 points and grabbing double-digit rebounds, and the Bulls were able to win their first ever NBA championship. Michael Jordan, the finals MVP. But the big things to remember from the series, you saw the growth of Scottie Pippen. And that's because going into the season, the plan was Michael Jordan by himself does not work. Michael Jordan by himself does not win championships. Any of your friends that watch this, any of your friends that talk about Bulls history and say, well, the Bulls won because they had Michael Jordan, it was more than just Michael Jordan. You saw it that year. Scottie Pippen came into his own. He didn't make the All-Star team that year. He had been an All-Star, didn't make it that year. But at the same time, you saw how dangerous of a second option he was. The best in the business compared to Michael Jordan. Can you ask for a better second option than Scottie Pippen? How about a great two-way player in Horace Grant, Stacey King? You saw all of these guys mature because Michael Jordan passed them the ball. Michael Jordan gave them a chance to succeed. And the best players in sports are those that elevate others. And especially when it comes to team bonding and team victories, it's all about making sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody can make an impact, and not just 4 other guys standing there while Michael Jordan's trying to take on an entire starting lineup. It makes no sense. Couple other footnotes from this series. Game 1 was actually aired in the afternoon, mid-afternoon finals game. Weird to think about now. That was the last time we saw an NBA finals game airing in the afternoon on the east side of town. Also, because the Lakers wouldn't make the NBA finals again until the 2000s, this was also the last NBA finals game at the old Forum, because then they would go to the Staples Center after that. But seeing the Bulls that year made me a bigger basketball fan, made me obsessed with the game because of the way Chicago played. No other team really played like them. Michael Jordan ended Showtime. And that's one of the reasons why the Chicago Bulls should be celebrated. Not just because Michael Jordan, but because of all the other players that helped Michael Jordan win that first NBA championship in 1991, a dream come true season, MVP, All-Star, Finals MVP, both Jordan and Pippen finishing in the top 10 in Defensive Player of the Year. That's how good they were. Make sure you give me a follow at Fensty Sports on X and Instagram and catch all previous Hoops Freak Fensty episodes on YouTube. New one comes out every single Saturday. Let's continue to celebrate the 1990s. I thank my guy, AB Adam Bernard, for being along for the ride, because where there's a 1990s NBA story, you let me know, I cover it. What were some of your favorite stories from the 1990s? Heck, for you Chicago Bulls fans, which Bulls championship run was your favorite of the 6 in the 1990s? Comment in the comments section. Let's talk about one of the greatest teams ever assembled. See you freaks later.